What's happening, everyone? Welcome to Module 3. In this module, we're going to take the theme we made in the last module and turn it into a full composition, a musical journey that's going to keep the listener's attention and take them on a roller coaster ride from the first note to the last. In these lectures, I'm going to go through two different ways to approach structuring a composition that probably are the ones you should master the first, and also two of the most popular. They're called AAA and AABA structures, and I'm going to explain everything about them in the next videos. Let's just dive right into it. I'll see you on the inside. What's up, everyone? Now that we've looked at how to write effective themes, counter melodies, and ostinatos, it's time to start looking at how we can structure these into effective compositions. So this topic is going to be track structure. And to give an example of this, I have taken one of the themes from the melodies that we wrote, and I've kind of created a rough structure to show you some of the points I want to make. So hopefully you're going to leave this lecture having a bit of a clearer picture on how you can structure a composition based on a single theme and get some ideas for how to, make them grow and evolve in an effective way. So something I recommend reading first is the issue of contrast and growth that is in the early lecture on this chapter, because that's going to help you make more sense out of this. But this is going to be a video on the topic of AAA themes, or tracks that basically are built on one theme that just builds and grows, like Time by Hans Zimmer, for example. So let's listen to this theme that we got. So that's the basic theme, right? That's the chords and the melody, nothing more. And again, I don't want you to worry too much about the actual orchestration. I just have my sketch tracks here, which is a different topic. It's something I'm going to be covering on a different occasion. This is just set up to give you a better idea of what I'm doing is actually doing to the track, because it's kind of hard to imagine all of these things if I'm only working with the piano. So I've kind of made, these quick little sketches to give you a better idea of what these principles are going to do to your piece of music. So this is our theme with chords and melody, just really roughly recorded. So when I have this theme, I need to think about, okay, how do I take this from a beginning through a development and then into some kind of climax? Because you need to take the listener on some kind of journey. It needs to start somewhere and end somewhere different. And to make sure people don't get super bored, it needs to grow and evolve through the whole piece. And since we only have one theme, the main ways of doing this is through arrangement, dynamic, and basically the instrumentations. So I've been talking about the concepts of contrast and growth. In this case, it's mostly going to be about growth, because we're not going to have any contrasting themes or things like that, at least not so far. So everything is going to be about making it grow and evolve. And the ways we can do that is through the two concepts of complexity and power, or energy. And since we only have a melody and chords here, we have quite a lot to grow on in terms of the complexity. So what I would probably do for the next section is to introduce the counter melody, which you see I've done here in just the horns. And the counter melody, let me just play that, and the melody together sounds like this. And so on. It's a quite standard counter melody based on the principles we've been looking at before. When the melody is resting, the counter melody is moving, and the other way around. Sometimes they're kind of, playing harmonies to each other. Other times the melody is resting and the counter melody is, playing a different movement to that. and so on. I'm not been overthinking this counter melody too much. I just played something because what's important here is more the issues of growth. So one way to make your track grow is to introduce a new element, and you can't just introduce anything. That's why I like to start by writing kind of your toolkit for your composition, which is melody, counter melody, the chords, and maybe an ostinato. So when you have these things, it's going to be almost like filling out a crossword puzzle or something, because you have all these elements that are building blocks that you can use to build and develop your composition. So in this case, I'll probably, start out like quite simple with only the melody and the chords. And then in the next section, I will, of course, increase the instrumentations. Here I've like taken a melody and just like put it an octave above. So we have double the melody to just make each individual element grow, but also adding more complexity. So we have both more complexity and power. There's also more power by adding in the horns as well, because it's going to add to, the energy of the section. So I'm increasing the instrumentation, but also increasing the complexity. Also, what I've been doing is adding in this little ostinato that I just recorded in the piano and some flutes. And this is also really rough, by the way, but it sounds like this. So all of a sudden we have the ostinato that's playing these fast evolving textures, as well as the horn counter melody. So now the theme is growing in both complexity and power. And this is a way to, keep it interesting and also make it grow in a very steady, predictable way. Okay, so now we've like figured out a way to make things bigger. This is the basics of what you should do. You just need to introduce new elements as you progress through the piece, and also increase the dynamics of what's already playing. So each instrument can play louder, or you can add more instruments, doubling the exact thing the other instruments are playing. And this is something I'm going to get back to in the orchestration chapter, but I want you to remember these things. Make it more complex, or make it louder, or both. But, there's a big but here. You will reach a limit where you cannot really go that much louder without things being, a bit weird or almost like over dramatic. So what you would do then is to go down, like, kind of just reset the energy. Maybe have a little break here after this big section before you introduce something that's even bigger, because that's going to increase the impact of what's coming next. But again, that's something we're going to explore in the other type of themes that we're going to discuss, the AABA themes. But, what we can do to make this theme grow even more is to increase the dynamic range of the whole piece. So instead of starting at this point, which is, fairly complex, there's a lot of harmonies, a lot of melody and stuff going on, and it is a whole string section playing. So we can definitely start in a soft place, a more quiet place. So what we could do is to simply, grab a piano and a pad and just make the most minimal version of this theme we can. So maybe that would be something like this. Just something like that over a sustained pad. And what I've used here is the piano playing the same theme. Let me just see so you can see it a bit more clearly. The melody, which I can the basic melody just with chords in the piano. So simple, minimal, soft piano arrangement. And I've just added some of my atmospheric textures that's in the sample pack included in this course, just under it to give it space and make it a little bit more lush and interesting. So now, instead of going louder, we've kind of, made it start quieter. And this is going to increase the dynamic range of the whole piece. Because suddenly this is going to sound bigger because the listener has been accustomed to this dynamic. So suddenly the full orchestral passage is going to be even more powerful. And this is the power of dynamics and contrasts. So let me just play that from the beginning so you can see exactly what I mean. Let's see where it is here. And there we go. Suddenly we have a finished composition. So, I just want to note that some of you might have realized I kind of changed the composition a little bit at the end, created a little tail that just extended and ended on a final note that finished the composition. But that's just an optional little choice I did to, feel it, make it feel a bit more resolved. What you optionally could do is to go even bigger, now introduce choirs, percussion, the whole shebang, and again, then the same principles apply. And you could also introduce, maybe more ostinatos that kind of fill out this, because this is very light and fluffy. Maybe you introduce, a guitar ostinato, like in Hans Zimmer's Time. Maybe you introduce, a synth bass that's really fat. Maybe you have massive choirs following the harmony. Maybe, the sky's the limit here. But my point is, if you wanted to continue from here, have to make sure that, two things happen. It needs to grow in complexity or power. And how you do that is up to you. It's just like, as long as you do that, the track is going to, remain interesting. And if you fail to do that, the track is kind of going to fall flat and that next section is going to feel redundant. So before you add any more sections to your piece, make sure that it actually serves some kind of purpose. Because you want to make the final part of the piece to feel like it's essential. It has to be there. That's where you're trying to arrive. So all these are ways that you can do that. And I've showed you how you can make something bigger based on our main theme, but also how you can make these sections sound louder by adding something that's even softer in the beginning. And also bear in mind that this mock-up is as rough as it gets. You can hear there's like a bit choppiness and, it's just played in really fast. And that's just how I do these things, just because this is about trying to make it easier to imagine what it's going to sound like. and make the right composition choices. I'm not going to spend too much time on the actual mockup here because it's only a sketch. But it does serve the purpose of kind of giving me an image of what it might sound like and what elements I need to introduce where to keep it interesting. So that's my tips when it comes to creating AAA themes. I hope that's helpful, and see you guys in the other video where we're going to discuss more contrasting themes. I'll see you there.
Hello students, in this video we will start looking at the first type of track structure common in cinematic music, which is the AAA or strophic form. This type of form is unique in that it has only one main theme that is repeated throughout the entire track from beginning to end. And this is common for some trailer music tracks, which usually have some kind of main theme that keeps building and building and just getting bigger and bigger, but it can also be heard in film scores and such. One example is Hans Zimmer's Time, which goes like this, as you guys probably know. And Time has this recurring 4-chord piano theme that you just heard that is repeated and developed through the entire track. And each time with more elements, a bigger ensemble, and a higher intensity. So let's briefly listen to Time just to see what I'm talking about when it comes to AAA structures. And this just keeps going and going and going. Like if we check in later here. So this 4-chord motif just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating for every section. Now, so what's important to keep in mind when you're writing a theme in this style is to constantly keep it growing and keep it interesting. You need each section to have a higher energy level than the last one. This can be done in a variety of ways. Making the ensemble play louder, this is fairly logical, but it also applies when you, for example, have a piano-based track. So you start maybe playing very softly, but then you play harder and harder and louder as the piece is progressing. Next one is adding more instruments and sizing up the instrumentation. And this is something we hear in Time as well. It starts with basically only the piano, and then they introduce some strings, and some more strings, some guitars, some percussion, some horns, and so on. So they keep sizing up the ensemble for each section to keep it growing and keep it interesting. The next one is to add more elements. And then I'm talking about introducing ostinatos, countermelodies, and so on. For example, this is what's happening in Time as well. It starts only with these chords, and then eventually they also introduce these guitar ostinato as well. And so on. And I think there's a horn melody later as well. So this is exactly what's happening in Time, and one of the main elements that makes it so interesting, because it's always evolving, it's always growing and introducing new things into the composition. The final one is to just add more movement. And then I'm talking about making the existing instruments or the existing elements in there without necessarily make them play louder or introduce any new things, but make them play quicker, like quicker rhythms and so on, or introduce some light rhythmical elements or bigger rhythmical elements as you progress. So giving it more movement, but with quicker rhythms. So let's briefly listen to some tracks in this form and see how they have done this, how they have been increasing the energy from section to section, how they have been structuring the tracks in general. So first, we have a track by Danny Koch called The Quickening from his newest album Through Possession Music. And this is a cue in AAA structure. I would say one can argue about that, but it's very close at least, if anything. Let's listen to it and see what he's done here. Alright, so in this track you can hear how a single theme has been developed throughout the entire track. It's always the same chords based on a single motif, but the dynamics, ensemble size, and the complexity is changing from section to section. He has also introduced a break before the climax to make the final part stand out even more. And this is very relevant when it comes to AAA type tracks, because the only ways you have to make the composition grow from section to section is through things like changes in ensemble size or orchestration or dynamics and things like that, rather than the musical things, because as the form kind of says you need to use the same theme over and over again. Then, of course, if you feel like you need a secondary theme, then it's no longer an AA theme, but this is something we're going to look at in the next video. But here, he's been using the same chords here as well, and the same kind of ostinato pattern, but in a very low dynamic to make the final climax stand out even more. So let's have a look at one of my tracks, Dawn, which I made many years ago. And it's also made in like an AAA structure with a single theme being repeated and developed from beginning to end. And this time, I want you guys to take note of what's going on and how the piece is developing and what's being introduced or changed from section to section, instead of me writing it on the screen like I did in the last one. So now it's you guys' turn. So let's just play it and have a listen. And here again, you can see it starts with only chords and an ostinato that's recurring through the entire theme. Next, the violin melody is introduced, and for each change, it's modulating to a new key. And in the next section, we have strings supporting the violin before the entire string section takes over, and we end up with a little climax with some choirs before we go back to a little piano outro again. And the production on this track is not the best. I think I made it when I was like 16, and I remember I never mixed my tracks at all. I just exported it right from Cubase, so the production is a little bit below what it could have been, but it makes a point on how you can choose to develop a theme in a simple way in an AAA fashion. Now, before we wrap up this section, I'm going to make a quick little cue live here, based on one of the melodies from earlier, showing you how I would approach structuring a track like this very briefly. So let's go down here and let's just listen to the theme that I'm going to use as the base for this little exercise right now. Let's just have a listen to the theme that we're going to be working with in creating a little cue with an AAA structure. Let's have a listen. this is the foundation for a little cue I'm gonna quickly make now in an AAA fashion. I'm gonna make 3 repetitions, and I'm gonna make it grow a little bit from section to section to keep it interesting. And this is not gonna be a fully polished track, but it's gonna be a quick little mock-up that can show you how to approach structuring a track when you already have a theme ready, which you should have by now after completing the rest of this chapter. By now you should have both your chords and your melodies, maybe some ostinatos and some rhythms that you don't necessarily have to use in the beginning of the track, but things you can introduce later to spice it up and make it more interesting. And these are things that really help when structuring an AAA type of composition, because those extra rhythms, those extra counter melodies and ostinatos you introduce, those will really start to make your track a bit more interesting when you are limited by the melodic choices and the musical choices in terms of pitches and themes. Okay, so first thing I'm gonna do, since I'm gonna make a simple AAA structure, I think I'm gonna copy this 3 times, use that as a foundation. Then this one. Alright, now so the first thing I'm gonna do is to introduce some string melody here. And I think I'm gonna go with cellos or something, but first I'm just gonna add some string chords. And we're not gonna think too much about orchestration, it's more just about the basic principles here that we're gonna try to showcase. Alright, so that's some basic chords right there. I'm just gonna add some bass as well. Alright, so we have some basic bass line there. Sweet. Now I'm gonna add the melody in cello. There we have a little melody. Now, let's say for the next section I want it to get bigger, so I'm gonna record some bigger string chords, and maybe I'm gonna have some strings in octaves playing this one. I'm gonna keep it simple, but I hope this all makes sense. Let me see, I'm just gonna copy this too. And actually, I think I might do a little modulation here. Let's say 2 steps up. Just to show how also modulation, as we've been looking at in the harmony chapter, can also be a good way to, increase the energy. And then I need to, of course, do the same with the piano. and let's make some octaves here. Now let's get rid of this cello, and there's like this really annoying wrong note in here. Let me see where it is. There it is. All right. This over. I'm gonna make things quick now. Something like that. And it also needs a bass line, I realized. I'm gonna record that as well. Have some bass in there as well. So, I mean, this is very rough, and don't worry about the orchestration that much right now. I mean, I'm just gonna show you how you can start with the theme, make it grow, introduce some new elements, which you're gonna do very soon, make the ensemble grow, make the instruments play louder, which is what's happening from here to here, for example, where the strings are playing fairly soft, but they are playing a lot stronger in the final part, for example. Alright, now it's time to introduce some new melodies. And I think I'm just gonna make some little counter melody up here in cello and horns or something. So, yeah, let's just play and see what comes out. Like that, I'm just gonna copy this and put it into like a solo horn. Okay, let's make it a little bit bigger, just to add some more power to it. Something like that. I'm just gonna actually put this in some low brass as well, but a lot less loud. Alright, let's listen just from the beginning now and see just a little example on how you can just use ensemble size, new elements, and dynamics to create an AAA structured composition when you already have a little theme. So let's have a listen to what we did here. Now, I hope this example helps you understand a little bit about the AAA structure, and what I could have continued with now is to continue adding on sections. For example, after this, I would maybe like to add a more quiet and calm section, like in the example we looked at earlier, and then maybe follow up with an even bigger climax. But I'm ending it here just to, for the sake of the length of this video, and I think you get the main idea now. So that's it for the AAA structure. There's going to be a couple of exercises for you under this video, so do them, and I'll see you guys in the next video where we will start looking at using forms with contrasting themes. I'll see you guys there. Welcome back, everyone. By now we have been getting familiar with the AAA structure, or strophic form. Now it's time to look at compositions that are using contrasting or secondary themes to make a little break between the main themes of the track. So the main role of a secondary theme is to usually create some kind of contrasting element to the main themes. If you're writing in an AABA form, the B theme would be a new element introduced before the final repetition of the main theme, the climax. If you were to eliminate the B theme, your composition would maybe risk ending up too repetitive. The B section might act as a necessary break between the existing elements, creating a good balance between repetition and change. Let's quickly listen to one of my tracks, Everlasting, which is structured in this way. as you can hear, we have a main theme that is first being presented here. Now, after the presentation of the main theme, we get a little contrasting break with something new. And you can also see that the dynamic, we're taking everything down, making it a bit more calm before we get to the climax section. And after this contrasting B section, we get over to the A theme again, now stronger than ever, before we get a little piano outro, also with the A theme, or the main theme. Now, we're going to get into some specific tools for coming up with nice secondary themes and making secondary themes that are effective. First of all, I want you to keep in mind that a lot of time you don't really need to approach the writing too structured. To me personally, whenever I feel my track needs a secondary theme after my main theme, this theme tends to kind of create itself. At least the general nature of it. A lot of times the gut feeling will guide you in the right direction, creating a theme that naturally follows your main theme. For example, sometimes you feel that after your main theme there should be a soft piano break with some sustained strings, or maybe you feel that it should be a build-up with staccato strings and like percussive drums. Sometimes you just feel what kind of direction is the right place to go. But then I go with those ideas and just experiment with different chords and melody elements and go from there. But other times you might hit a heavy writer's block. And this happens to me a lot of times on secondary themes and B themes, and based on the feedback from you guys, I get the impression that this happens to you guys as well. So at such times, it can be helpful to look at all the tools that I'm going to share with you now in this video, in the next video. So as I mentioned, the role of the B theme is often to be a contrasting element. This means that you need to differentiate this theme from the A theme. Because if you're using the same scales, the same dynamic, the same length of the notes, the same rhythms, the same chords in the B theme, it won't necessarily be as effective. It will then maybe sound too repetitive again and just confusing. Therefore, we should aim to make the B theme different from the main theme. That said, you don't want it to sound like you just threw in a random part of a different track. You want it to sound cohesive and connected. However, you will want some kind of difference between the two themes, so this can be done in several ways, both through composition and orchestration. And here are some of the main ways or the main things that I look at when I want to create contrasting themes. The first is rhythm. If you want a contrasting B theme, you can first start by looking at rhythm and making the rhythm of the theme different. For example, short notes in the main theme versus long notes in the B theme. Or longer or quicker chord changes in the B theme. For example, if the chords are changing very slowly in the main theme, maybe you have a more moving B theme with quicker chord changes. The next one is scales. For example, a minor scale melody versus a major scale melody. So if your main theme is a major theme, maybe you might think about creating a little minor contrasting B theme, because this change of emotion might give you the kind of contrast you desire in this kind of theme. Next we have instrumentation. And this is something we've been looking at already slightly, and I'm talking about a bigger or smaller instrumentation than the contrasting theme. So for example, in Everlasting, as we just listened to, in the B theme we have a smaller ensemble. It's only a harp, some sustained strings, and a piano. So we've been using instrumentation to create a contrast. Next we also have complexity. And this basically means many layers versus not so many layers, for example. Now, what I mean is, if your main theme is very slow moving, very big, but it is not a lot of elements, it is just one big wall of sound playing chords and the melody for it, for example. And a contrast to that could be a 4-part or 4-layer, more complex middle section that builds up with a lot of movement and a lot of things going on if there's less things going on in the main theme. Or it can be the other way around. Maybe have a fairly complex main theme with a lot of layers, some ostinatos, some counter melodies, a melody, some moving chords, and so on. Maybe you want the complexity to be maybe you want it to be simpler in the B section. Maybe it's just some sustained pads and a simple melody. Or maybe no melody at all, just a few chords. So complexity can be also a good way to create contrast between two sections. And next we have dynamics, and this is fairly obvious and something we've been looking at already, and also applies to Everlasting as well as some of the songs we looked at in the previous video. And this is using a change in dynamics as a contrasting element. Again, in Everlasting, this is what I did in the B section, making that part a lot more quiet than the rest of them. And this is something you can see in a lot of different tracks that we have in front of us here as well. Everlasting, the quietest part is the B section to create contrast. In Farewell Life, which is a lot longer than the other ones, you can see there's a lot of contrasting breaks here, where it's a lot more quiet in these contrasting sections than the main sections, which you can see here. And these are all tracks we're going to look at very soon. This is also a B section of a Thomas Bergersen track. So using dynamics is also a very, very powerful way and a very easy or simple way to do it. And then finally we have harmony. So just using basically different chords or quicker chord changes than on the main theme. So again, if you use three of the main chords like tonic, subdominant, and dominant in the main theme only, maybe you use different chords in the scale in the B theme, or maybe you use 5 or 6 chords to make it a bigger variety of chords in that theme. So all these things can be contrasts between the two themes. So we have rhythm, different scales, different instrumentation, complexity, dynamics, and harmony. And there's a lot of other things you can do as well, but these are some of the main ones that comes to my mind, at least, when I'm thinking about creating contrast between two themes. So what you should aim for in a B theme is to make it feel connected yet contrasting. You don't want it to seem like you just cut out a random part of a different track and just threw it in there. At the same time, you don't want it to become too repetitive. So one way to do this is to use a motif or a variation from the main melody and change up the harmony, the speed, the instrumentation, and the dynamics. Or you can use some kind of development of your main motif, as we've been looking at in the melody chapter. So let's look at some specific things we can do. Let's revisit some tracks in the ABA form, one which we look at in the previous chapter, and let's revisit let's have a look at some tracks here and look at what they have been doing to create a contrasting B theme based on the different things we've been talking about right now. So I'm going to start with one of my old tracks called Immortality. And while it's not one of my best tracks, it kind of is a good way to explain how I've been approaching creating B themes. So let's just listen to it and see what we find out. Alright, let's just quickly stop for a moment and just look at what's going on here. This B theme is contrasting to the main theme in several ways. First of all, the harmonic progression has stopped. There's been a recurring chord progression that's been repeating itself all until the B section here. We have now landed on a drone, one long root note with no chord movements over it at all. Second, the main melody is gone as well. So now the quick counter melody is playing as an ostinato as the background drone grows together with a pulsing synth. The melodic movement here is quicker compared to the slower main theme. Let's just have a listen. we have this like quick like da 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 melody movement instead of the long, slow ones in the main theme. So this is also a way I've been using rhythm to create contrast. Now there's also a change in the instrumentation. While the theme earlier, the main one, was dominated by long strings and piano, it's now consisting of staccato strings and a choir, plus a little bit of percussion and some synths. So there's a complete change in the instrumentation. Next, it's also using dynamics as a way to make the next and the final A section as big as it can get. It is, strictly speaking, as you look at the waveform, getting louder, but it is not continuing with a bigger version of the previous theme. It's making a little break, and it's not getting noticeable louder. So it creates a little break between the final A section. You can see that I've been using both dynamics, harmony and instrumentation, rhythm and complexity to create a contrasting B theme. And let's just listen to it once more with a little bit of the previous A theme so you can really get what's going on. And there we go. So let's just quickly look at what was going on here now. You can see that I've used both dynamics, harmony, instrumentation, rhythm, and complexity, less harmonic activity and so on, to create a contrasting B theme. However, it doesn't feel completely out of place, even though there's a lot of differences. This is mainly because I've used a counter melody, or the melodic element here in the choirs, as the main ostinato in the final A section that's coming here. And this creates this kind of bridging element that connects all the different track sections together and avoids it from becoming just way too different. And this is something I recommend doing, as it can make your entire composition seem a lot more cohesive and connected. Using some small elements from different parts, but in subtle ways, so it connects together, but it still keeps evolving. Next, let's quickly look at some other tracks. We have a lot of nice stuff going on here, which are all great examples of good B themes. So let's start with a trailer music classic, Blood and Stone from Audio Machine. We're just going to go through these a little bit quick here, but we're just going to get the main kind of direction of where the B themes are going. So you have this main chords that keep kind of growing and repeating. This is the main theme, right? You have this harmonic progression that keeps going. You have these ostinatos / melodies that make up the melodic elements of the cue, and these keep repeating and changing in complexity throughout the track. But in here, for example, we have this little B section that is very contrasting, and we're just gonna quickly listen to that now, as it is a good example of a simple way to just create a contrasting B section to not just keep building the same theme over and over again without any breaks. Let's have a listen here. This is only a bass synth and percussion. So it's contrasting in the sense that there's no harmonies, all the melodic elements are gone, and it's a lot more rhythmical than the track has ever been up until this point. But it still uses the same kind of drum sound that they've been having before. They're combining the synth and the percussion with the existing theme and the existing ostinato, so everything sounds very connected, even though there are contrasting parts. Let's move on and listen to Empire of Angels by Thomas Bergersen again, a track that you should be fairly familiar with by now. That main theme, and it repeats again here in the second part. And again. But then after these 3 or so repetition of the main theme, you have a contrasting B section. Let's listen to that. You can hear that the kind of ostinato stays in the background, so it still feels familiar. But then there's a lot more slow chord changes. It's a lot more calm, it's a lot more quiet, and there is a way smaller instrumentation involved in this section. And the melodies are less pronounced, they are more just, floating all around their small melody fragments here and there, compared to like a very strong main melody that's being featured early in the track. You can also hear how the harmonies are completely different. We've been going away from this main chord progression that's been driving the track forward until this point. So he's been using different chords as well. So you can see how they use both a difference in complexity, in dynamics, in instrumentation, in harmonies, rhythms, and so on. Now, let's also just quickly have a look at this cue called Hope, which is, I think, a track I made in high school. And it has this main theme that's being repeated, and then I have a contrasting B section, and then an A theme again. Let's quickly look at that. theme that is being repeated, and then we get to this contrasting B section. Here again, similar to the other track, the B theme is both a contrasting and connecting element. There is a difference in the instrumentation, the dynamics, the rhythmic activity, and the harmonic progression, but there's this woodwind melody in this part. However, you have this little staccato pattern in the B section here. That's being used as the main ostinato in the final A section, which is one connecting element, and then, while everything else has changed in the B section, the harmonies, the complexity, you still hear the main melody of the theme played in flutes in the background here. Even the two different themes are basically different in almost every way. You have these small connecting elements that really kind of glues the entire track together. And in the end, we have Farewell Life, which also uses a lot of changes in dynamics and everything, and it's like almost a 7-minute track. But let's quickly go through the main things here. That's the main little piano thing that's going on. Same thing, it just grows in intensity, bigger ensemble, so on. Here I'm taking it down again. And then I introduce like a little secondary theme here. Different rhythm, different feeling, different chords, but it's the same chords, just played backwards. But it feels a bit different. It feels a bit different. It gives it a fresh little breath of something new. And then both of the themes, and then this theme kind of evolves. But I introduced the piano theme from earlier, so it feels connected. And then this keeps growing. And we get a little break again with the original piano motif. And now all the themes kind of come together and build up. So in the background here, I'm using all the other piano themes from here as well, combined with the build-up of this other theme. Building and getting more complex, but I hope this is a little introduction or a little overview over some ways you can create more contrasting B themes that still feel rather connected to your main theme. Now to wrap this up, we're gonna go down and revisit this little AAA theme we did in the previous video, but now I'm just gonna quickly make a little B theme while we're at it. So we have this little second repetition here, and just to make some space for the B theme, I'm gonna make that before this little climax that's not very climatic, but it's gonna be alright. Now I'm gonna move it over there, and since this is still a fairly calm part, I need to find some way to make it a little bit more contrasting. Whoops, seems like we forgot to move the pianos to here, I suppose. Almost. There we go. So let's just make it extremely simple. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this, but So let's see what we have here. So we have a chord progression, we have a main melody, and we have strings and whatever like that. So let's just make something that has more movement, because this one is very slow and sustain based. Let's make something that's more quiet and simple, but quicker and not as melody focused. So let's something quick and only piano, for example. That could work well. And use some different chords. So I could, for example, choose to do something like, let's see. you get the idea where I'm going with this. So what you want to do is to create something that's a bit different but connected. I've been trying to like incorporate some of the main parts of the melody in here and making the chords different, making it a bit different in the rhythms and so on, and in instrumentation. And this is basically what you want out of your secondary theme. So I hope this has been helpful, and in the next video we're gonna go further into depth in how you can make your composition stay interesting to the listener from beginning to end, and how to structure your different sections, and a little bit about the orchestration behind them, but that's something we're gonna get into more in depth later. So I'll see you guys later in the next video.
Alright, now, not only do we have a theme, but we've taken that theme and created a full composition structure out of it. This is a big step, and we're getting closer and closer to a completed cinematic track. Now, you've created a full skeleton of your track, the foundational work that's going to make it a lot easier for you to do the orchestration and the mock-up job. Now, if you have some time to spare before we open the next module, I really encourage you to do this all over again. Take another theme that you've written, or some of your old tracks, and experiment with the principles we've just gone through in this module until we open the next one. I'll see you guys in the next module. Hey everyone, just want to look at another track that kind of uses contrasting changes in the dynamics a little bit differently than the short break we saw in the previous track. So this is the demo I did for Nucleus, the library by Audio Imperia, and I think it is a fairly good example of ways to use dynamics to enhance the final section of your piece. So let's just have a quick listen to it, and then I'm going to go into the details of some of the mindsets and thoughts behind structuring it the way I did. And bear in mind, this was made in just, I think, a couple of hours on my laptop in Norway using this library. So I really love this library because it allows me to work really fast and make it sound good straight out of the box. But it also proves that some of the principles I'm talking about here can help you create tracks really fast once you kind of make them second nature. So let's have a listen to it. So that's the big finale of the track. And one of the key things that I've done to make this ending sound as large as it does in this context is that I've simply made it, first of all, the largest part of the track, but also really tried to minimize the amount of dynamic peaks I have in the track as a whole, and also try to limit how many seconds of the track actually sounds very large and grandiose. So most of the track, all of the intro, and most of the middle parts of this track are fairly soft and understated. It's only this little crescendo here That's the only section that comes close in terms of intensity. But what I've done, as we talked about, I didn't go from here to here and just go straight into this. Like this. Now suddenly this sounds softer, which it is. You can even see that in this waveform. So what I've done to make sure that this final section really stands out and lifts the piece is that I've taken things all the way down again to one of the softest parts of the whole track. And this whole section is fairly soft. It's only at the very end it just ramps into the following section. It's not a gradual build like in the other track. And this just kind of drags out this dynamic and makes the listener's ear settle for this dynamic again. And this makes sure that when I ramp into this section, it appears a lot larger. So that is a different way of approaching the kind of way of using dynamics to enhance certain sections. And another consideration I made is that I want this to be long enough for the ear to really settle for this and then ramp into this section, rather than just having a tiny little section that is quiet and then going to the loudest section. Because this would not be enough to really kind of make the ear settle for this dynamic as the normal level again. And it would diminish the effect of this part. So it's kind of the opposite of what I did for the more static building one that we just looked at, and a different kind of consideration. So in this one, again, I wanted to kind of settle the ears for a lighter, quieter dynamic. And that's one of the reasons I stretched out this part and kind of took the listener on a journey and then ramp up into the final section. And in general, these loud peaks are a small part of the composition as a whole, and that is going to alone make sure that they stand out more compared to if the most of the track was really loud and I had just a few quieter parts. So these are all different ways to think about using contrast, using dynamics, and using contrasting themes to really make your biggest themes stand out and pop and sound powerful. So I hope that's been helpful. I'll see you guys later.